This episode of the BeanCast is brought to you by Methodify by Delvinia. Get real-world customer feedback in hours, not weeks. Schedule your demo and get a free $20 Amazon gift card. Go to methodify.it/BeanCast and Methodify it today. Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 598. Fun with URLs. For Monday, June 22nd, 2020. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob North. Thanks for joining us. What is the calculus that goes into maintaining racially insensitive brand mascots? Many of the longtime offenders are finally getting the message by either changing or eliminating them altogether. But why did it take so long? Tonight we'll discuss. Also, NBC urges a different path toward modernizing the upfronts, the benefits of in-game social interactions, the Walmart Shopify deal, plus this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the founder and creative tech strategist at the Antipodean, Ms. Michelle Excell. Michelle, hi, welcome back.
So good to be back, Bob. I've been at home for, 3 months, so glad to be getting out.
Even when you're just doing a Skype call, it makes a difference to get out and talk to people.
Sure does.
Now, next, he's the co-host of the Across the Pond Marketing Transformed podcast. Marketing transformation consultant, Mr. Samuel Monnie is here. Sam, hi.
Hey, Bob. Hey, crew. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me back, Bob.
Oh, you're welcome. And finally, he's an author, speaker, and founder of Toronto-based agency Church and State. Mr. Ron Tite joins us. Hi, Ron.
Hello, Bob, and hello to the other panelists who apparently have been at home for 3 months. I and my wife had a newborn come into this world 2 days into the pandemic, so you have no idea how happy I am to be here with you tonight. Can we make this 9 hours long? Is that possible?
Well, we'd be lucky if we get an hour. We're going to try, though. We're going to try to fill up the time. Well, first of all, I want to talk about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, which is racist logos. In preparing for the first topic, I went in knowing a few of the more obvious racist brand mascots out there. I mean, you've got, of course, Mrs. Butterworth, and you've got Aunt Jemima. You've got the cream of wheat box. But there were still many I hadn't even considered. Things like Darlie, which the story is just terrible. We'll get into that in just a minute, which is a Chinese brand. And what was fascinating to me was the extent brands would go to justify keeping these racist logos alive, especially considering how deep the tendrils of racism ran in these brands. It wasn't just that the logos were, racist and racially insensitive in a number of ways. It was also the fact that the whole justification cycle that's gone on for decades and the whole use of imagery and the whole stories behind these characters are filled with racist overtones to begin with. So, Sam, explain to me a little about the delta that has led to years of justification, and how did brands get it wrong for so long? I mean, what's your opinion about this? I mean,
Bob, I think the first thing is I'm going to chastise you on the topic framing, because I was watching the news this afternoon, and actually they're just calling it racist marketing and racist advertising. So they're not pigeonholing it as a logo thing or a small thing. It's just racist marketing, which in a simplified form is quite shuddering. It kind of it's very provocative, but it really makes you take a step back and think, wow, that's how the outside world is processing, and that's how other people are articulating what's going on. And so for me, the first thought is, if you're looking at this and just eating your popcorn, watching others go through it, don't get so comfy. It's coming to you soon, and you probably won't see it coming because it's now bigger than just the logo or the mascot. And I think for me, you've definitely got to take stock and really think about it. I think in the last few weeks or few days, Walmart no longer are locking away their ethnic beauty care products because I guess they've deemed that racist. And for a lot of people, they didn't even notice that the ethnic or the sort of minority targeted products were locked away. People are like, really? Land O'Lakes are probably breathing a sigh of relief because I think back in February, they took the Indigenous woman icon off their packaging and copped a bit of heat, but now they were 3 months ahead of the scandal. And for me, the biggest issue is that Animal Crackers removed the cages in 2018 after lobbying by PETA. Now, Animal Crackers is a food brand, and the animals are cartoon characters, but they were uncaged 2 years ago, long before this furore is kind of blown up. And for me, when I tell people, yeah, the cartoon animals were free before the racist logos were removed, that kind of puts it into some more context of, I think, just the general blind spots that people have. But I think, Bob, you may have researched and understand the issue, but I just don't think some people even do, because Uncle Ben was essentially a servant Negro, subservient. It's like basically a help. And a lot of these logos are having issues because they've got these minstrel associations and these subservient stereotype and caricatures. And so if you're walking around your corporate buildings, you may see old imagery, paintings or brochures and icons. You may have them in your boardrooms or your office walls or your reception areas. And now you might see suddenly a lot of things coming down, a lot of spaces opening up because people are suddenly taking another look at something that they just cast a blind eye to. And so for me, the interesting thing, it is nuanced and it is complicated. And I think you mentioned Dali as a brand, which
before we get to Darley, I do want to go back to what you said about the Uncle Ben's, because the justification that it was bandied around by the brand for so many years was that it was actually about a farmer who was a rice farmer, and it was this really beautiful story about this black business owner farmer. And I'm like, who believes this? I mean, it's just like, why do you believe it? I mean, how does this, is it just the racism that's endemic within the marketing community, or is there something just more insidious even than that? You know, it's just these stories are created in order to hide the real truth about what these brands' misdeeds have been in the past.
Yeah, they try and justify it with this. No, but looking back, it was done so respectfully. The origins of the circuit, and in some cases, the origins, Cream of Wheat started in 1893. You know what? If anything was started in 1893 depicting a character like that, I'm willing to put money down that it was not done respectfully.
And then I think I did research the Uncle Ben's one, and it gets a bit more complicated because back in 2007, they repositioned Ben as this chairman of the board, this entrepreneurial African-American. And that was actually done by an African-American leader who's now actually Global VP of Talent and Learning. I think his name's Vincent Howell. And he led that modernization in 2007. And so the reason it gets complicated is I've been in those situations where there's something off, and you're trying to fix it, but trying to fix it may not get you to the end point because often you or I have not had the power. So in some situations, I've had the power where I saw a storyboard come in. There was a stereotype. There was different characters in these, just hyper real roles. Someone was it was a refrigerator ad, and it was Y&R Chicago, and it came in, and there was a grazer stealing toppings off the pizza, and there was, a gazer opening the fridge and looking into it, and then there was a thief. Storyboard came back. Guess who was cast as a thief? Yes, it was the African-American guy. And so me being the marketing director, I could say, we're going to fix that. It must have come from the agency creative director to me, but I was able, in a position of power, had a voice to change it. And so I come back to the Uncle, and the ad went, we fixed it. made the tweak, ad was awesome, did really well. So I think in this situation, it gets more complicated because there are voices who speak up or have influence, but they ultimately may not have the power, the veto power to change a multi-million, multi-billion-dollar brand. And so people are clinging onto something because it's a P&L line item and it delivers a lot of revenue. And, you know, as I started digging into Mars and their values and their principles, I think they had like 36 policies to do with human rights and farmer income and climate care and water stewardship. So if you're a brand and you think, yeah, we've got all these values, we're woke, we've got our purpose and all this stuff in there, you could still be caught out in June 2020 saying, oh yeah, we were fixing it, but the world has moved so much faster than you have made your decisions and your brand perspective. So I mean, I can keep going on, and I did want to cover up the Dali story, but
please talk about the Dali.
Quickly before you jump off, Uncle Ben's, because I'm glad you brought up that story about 2007, because when I read about that, them promoting Uncle Ben to the CEO of the company and building an interactive experience around it, they obviously knew something was off, and they. I think what we're missing right now with a lot of these brands is an actual recognition. Over the last day, I've been reading articles for weeks, but since you put forward the topics for this week, Bob, I've been reading specifically about these particular brands, and the brand statements that are coming back are, now is the time to make the change, or we have now realized. And that's not quite cutting it for me, because they have not just realized. And I think that how they got this far, and they have said that they have continued to make tweaks over the years. They've continued to make tweaks, but they're building on something that they knew was fundamentally wrong.
Yeah.
But only one of the brands
get us to where we are today, where they can finally claim that they have finally realized, and now that they understand that they are causing some people, discomfort.
Yeah, but only one of the brands has taken away the look. I mean, like Aunt Jemima is going to is going away, but all the other brands are just going to update. That's what I've gotten from the stories. Am I wrong about that?
And visually update is what a couple of them
and it's just like, what does that fix?
Visual updates. Like, what does that mean? I want to see these brands actually come to grips and have a moment of self-realization that they talk about. And this is with a lot of things that have happened. It's with some of the, the racist scenarios and comments and just flat out discrimination that have come out of the agency world, where people are saying sorry and that they realize that something they did caused offense, but they are not showing self-realization. And I think that this is a common problem across the board right now. So people aren't saying, you know what, I was in that meeting and I realized that what we were doing was wrong. Or we realized that back in the day, the reason that we've been trying to update it is because we have been trying to make it better. But you can't make something better that comes from a place of discrimination to begin with.
That's
so
exactly
I want them to realize it, not cover it up.
Well, how do you have that conversation with, I'm just looking at the leadership team of Mars and Uncle Ben's. How do you raise that topic? And when you look at the industry, the advertising industry, and the numbers that are being released by the agencies, where especially the black representation inclusion is disproportionately lower than the in the US in just the general population, and 3% is about the industry standard, and some agencies are plus or minus that. So this very issue is the one issue they had the blindest of blind spots, and the voices may be raising themselves and pointing out the issue were being suppressed or ignored because everyone else clearly knew better. And it sounds quite arrogant of me to say that, but I've been in a room when we've had some creative produced at a former organization, and I talked about one story where I was marketing director, who was the client, so I could change the storyboard. But in another situation where we go around the room and the CMO looks at me and says, "Sam, you don't look happy." And I said, "Yeah, if it was me and I was in charge, I would not run the ad." The CMO, fine, ran the ad. And so when those decisions are made, and a prior guest in the show, I think last week or the week before, was talking about some BYU research, which talked about how many female voices need to be present for it to be listened to. It's like 4 out of 5. And it's like, what? So I'm not having it that they didn't know. They weren't listening. And as I say, these caricatures rooted in American South, pre-Reconstruction or those time frame, which are all black, and the very presence who's missing from the highest positions of marketing and advertising and leadership in these companies. And so that's why I'm saying this is going to happen again. This is going to be the same thing if you don't have the representation in your creative teams, in your products, in your portfolio. So your products, which suddenly you'll see that you've got four white characters or four white cartoons or all the white cast from Friends or whatever those things are, you're now suddenly thinking, shoot, we've got 6 months stock in store and it makes us look a bit racist. Well, those blind spots, I guarantee you, because again, I've been there where you've been talking to marketings and brand managers and marketing directors, hey, you don't have any diverse mermaids. Mermaids are half fish, half female. They're not even real. Why are we arguing about including diversity in this? And I've had those real arguments where literally it's like, but they're not even real and you won't get to have diversity in them. And so that is the institutional, the systematic problems and blind spots that companies have. So as I say, these 4 or 5 companies front of mind are going to get all the attention, but this is going to keep happening for weeks, months, and years because the blind spots and the lack of inclusion representation and the voice is missing. And then I can come on to the Dali one.
Yeah, let me set up that Darley one a little bit, because for me this is a real fail on the part of Colgate-Palmolive, because this is not a brand that they had, that they were trying to protect, that they were trying to preserve. This is a brand that had a huge racist history, still has a racist history, and they actually invested in it and became, a major player in the company that produces this. So, what leads a brand to just ignore the fact that this product used to be called Darky, that even as Darlie, it still says something like what's it translate to? The
black person toothpaste is how it's colloquially known in China right now. And to cut you off, Bob, it has 17% of the market in China, 45% in Taiwan, 28% in Malaysia, 21% in Singapore. It's a market leader in China. Those sources are according to Forbes. That answers your question. I'm market leader, I'm selling. Let's keep it moving. Now I'm embarrassed into trying to tackle an issue in a different culture where you've got a translation which literally is black person toothpaste. You've got to unpack the minstrel character that used to be it's just so messy, but 17% market share explains why in the P&L, according to a CFO or a CEO, it's contributing value. Now, that sounds quite brutal and quite harsh. And I know, again, some folks there, I'm sure they wouldn't like it positioned that way. But, well, explain it to me other than the market share, because that's what a lot of leaders and marketers, they're looking at the numbers and the P&L. They're not looking at the culture and the people and the right thing to do. And so for me, that explains exactly why they are where they are.
And don't forget that they probably, when they acquired the brand, they probably issued a press release that said, we're going to leave local leadership in place because they know the market better than we do.
Well, what are the... Go ahead, Sam.
I was going to say they reassured people that, we changed it from Darky to Dali, but it's still black person toothpaste. And that was... So the problem is, if you go through the data and the history, there's a lot of apologies and a lot of... This is why, I won't call it a cover-up, but this is why it becomes so problematic, because if you tackled it when you first acquired the company, it was not as controversial then, but now it's going to be more painful. And so that's why in the whole industry, it's becoming more challenging because now that the companies are being forced to, ad agencies are being forced to release their employment data and showing the disparity, they're essentially admitting in June 2020 that they have not been working on it since the advent of advertising. So it's very uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think my take, and sorry, that previous comment was completely sarcastic, in case anybody was wondering. But if you, as a large CPG organization, if you can't get this right, I do not have the confidence that you're going to be able to tackle the bigger and more important issues around staffing and hiring and training and representation at the executive levels. The things that are really going to break systemic racism. If you can't get a spot and a logo and a brand asset right, I can't believe it. If you just think you're going to go out and change you got to change one letter. So you're acknowledging that there's a problem, but you're not acknowledging that, if we just put a coat of paint, this will be fine. The foundation will still be the foundation. And as a creative guy, I sit here and think, who is going to be the courageous person to step up and say, what an amazing opportunity to blow it all up, to blow every single brand asset that each of these brands has had in place since the 1800s, and start completely fresh with consulting people who you've offended over the years for their participation, Instead of changing one letter or updating the image of Aunt Jemima,
But
or the Uncle Ben's
most of
photo.
these companies, with the exception of maybe Mars, which is still privately owned, I mean, most of these companies have fiduciary responsibilities to shareholders. Blowing up a brand and making it go away is a big deal. And it's just like the only reason that they're willing to blow it up now, one of them at least is willing to blow it up now, is because they realize that if we continue with this, we're going to lose all this market share.
Oh, but see, I don't know, Bob. I think, I mean, especially
I'm not
certainly
justifying
10
it.
years ago.
I'm not
No,
justifying
I know you're
it.
not justifying it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I think it's an incredible business opportunity that matches their fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders. Because I don't know who's, what the rice category is like. I don't know what the maple syrup category is like. It certainly needs a breath of fresh air. Certainly, that's not going to do it. I think it would do it. It just needs somebody courageous to step up the plate, willing to do it.
So is that the remedy? Is the remedy is just individual voices? Is it like, obviously diversity training and sensitivity classes and all that other stuff doesn't really do much in the end. So, I mean,
Well,
what do you...
obviously, listening to the voices is really important. I think,
Right.
Ron, you just mentioned that. So in one of the articles about this, one of the brands said, we've heard the voices who are, speaking up and criticizing, especially voices from the Black community. And that sounds great, but not one article has cited any of those voices or has cited conversations that the brands have had with people, or voices that, people who've been speaking out against this for the last 2 or 3 decades who have worked in advertising, or, who are familiar with the brands. So recent history, and have, seen some of these brand tweaks along the way. So again, I think that there needs to be a come to Jesus. I think these brands have to acknowledge that there's criticism. They haven't come out and said in what way they understand that they have stepped.
Well, it goes back to
repeatedly, foot after foot, for decades and decades in the wrong direction.
It goes back to what Sam was saying originally. It's just like there's no people in the room. There's no people. There's no representation in the room. There's no representation at that higher level, giving that decision power. We know from previous shows talking about this that the number of African American or Black CEOs is abysmal.
4 in the Fortune 500. 4 in the Fortune 500, Bob. And that's the point, So if I got 3 solutions, I think the first one, which is being talked about, Michelle's bringing up, is if you're doing it anyway, and I think Uncle Ben said, oh, yeah, we're working on it, or Aunt Jemima, we're working. Okay, well, then be radically transparent. Show us the behind the scenes. Publish that content. Make it front and center on the site. Because you guess what? When you go to each of those brand sites, which I've done, not a peep about what's going on right now. On the corporate site, in the press release section of the latest press release, yes. But it's kind of not front and center. So if I can't find it on your website, I can see on Twitter your claims about supporting Black Lives Matter. You just don't have credibility. Again, that sounds harsh, but you need to have matching luggage. And right now, it just seems like you said something because you got called out. But then show me the money, prove it to me. And the CMO should be out there very publicly using this as an opportunity to be the change and role model that. And I think that's one step. The second step is, and I told the story about my time at Kenmore and the ad, where I was able to say, change it. But if and you are now put on notice that having one Black person who's a brand manager somewhere, or one Black creative in the room, or one person in the room, and all eyes are on them, and then you don't listen to them, you have to admit that you're disqualified. So basically, most of the CMOs, most of the CEOs, most of the marketing directors, most of the creative directors are disqualified. That is quite frightening because the industry is not built to support this issue. And so it's going to be painful because they're going to have to give up their power or share their power. And I don't know any mild, timid, sort of modest CMOs and CEOs are going to say, yes, Black person, I'm going to take your voice and I'm going to listen and actually act on exactly what you said. So that's going to be hard. But then the third thing I think is it's really hard to fix a bad idea. So I keep banging on about focusing and over-investing in marketing capability building beyond the P&L. So it's not just unconscious bias training, which they've all declared. That's actually not going to work. this needs to be linked to empathy, insights, customer experience, listening, the way you craft your brand purpose, the way you train and upskill people. You need to provide equitable access to learning and growth opportunities, the coaching and teaching that happens, leaders human enough to have real conversations, letting go of the P&L as the starting. So your fundamental ways of marketing capability, marketing university, marketing excellence, or advertising excellence needs to have this in your organization. If you dare believe that, oh, we're going to make everyone do a 60-minute unconscious bias training and back to normal, you're doomed to failure, because the system is broken and it's institutional. And you're going to then end up with more stereotypes, cultural blind spots, ageist ads which don't reflect or show disability in a modern light. So you're just going to make the same bad mistakes just everywhere else.
Yeah, it can be summarized with, that in every CMO should just put a yellow sticky that says, I shouldn't read your values, I should experience your values. Because they're writing the part that they've all done. That's super easy to do. They crank it to their agency and say, come up with an acronym that makes us look great. And they cobble together, 5 great values. And then nobody looks at how those values get actually implemented through every single level of the organization. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's time HR took over marketing. If we're talking about fundamental organizational change, well, marketing's not doing it. So maybe it's time for somebody else to come in and take over.
I'm not sure that it's HR, because I think, they've been yeah. So don't even get me started on that.
Exactly.
They're just towing the company
exactly.
line.
In most of my experience, HR know this and don't have the power and organizational clout, which is why I keep asking CMOs to step up in all of this. Very few are. The CMO actually has the power, the resources, and the customer, the external and internal impacts. You're touching customers, consumers, and employees. The CMO can do that. And if they don't, no one will, because guess what? This is where we are. So while I've been bashing them, here is the opportunity. The challenge is, which CEOs or which corporate boards are going to realize they don't actually have the right leadership because they're not in the room. And as much as they task the CMOs in seat now, if we know that there is like 4% diverse or black CMOs, if not less, in the US, you're not going to fix this problem. People of color, 13% or 12%, it's still not enough. So you're disqualified and not competent. Are you going to face reality, or are you going to bluff because your bluff is being called?
Yeah, but Sam, what you also said is really important, that we have to blow up a lot of processes. I would say that you need the CMO. Within ad agencies, I would say that you need all of your upper management, but also your CFO. I think that the CFO or the financial discipline in general within agencies is used as an excuse for lack of change so many times. I'm sick of it. And if you actually bring the financial team into those discussions and they say, well, we can't do that, we can't hire an overhead role. We don't know that if you restructure things, if it's actually going to make the business better, because you only have one P&L for the whole agency and you don't break it up. You're not doing proper financial modeling. If you don't get into it, then you're not going to actually be able to change, because at some point someone will say, oh, this won't be approved, or this isn't approved, and it will fall back on financial reasons. So I think it needs to go even deeper. And I think that we need to bring, the actual financial process for the whole agency or brand into question and bring those people forward, because we use finance as an excuse too many times to not change things.
We actually have other things to talk about here today, so I'm going to move this conversation along to the next topic. But first, I want to talk about our sponsor, who's very, very timely for this particular week, Methodify by Delvinia. And I want to give you a chance to get a $20 Amazon gift card just for checking them out. Now, the reason that they are so topical right now, why this is such an important ad read for you and your business, is because you're a real person. You've got coworkers, you've got employees. They're real people. They're dealing with tough decisions right now. They're dealing with a marketplace that's kind of dangerous in a lot of ways for your brand. You say one wrong thing in your advertising and you could unleash a social media firestorm against you. This is why our sponsor, Methodify by Delvinia, is the perfect partner for you and your brand's needs. Methodify, what they do is they collect real feedback from your actual customers on concepts or creative before you release it to the world. And the whole process takes hours, not days. Methodify gives insight professionals and senior marketing people the information they need to power better brand decisions that will protect their brands and themselves. Now, Methodify has been used to test digital creative for a number of brands during this pandemic in lots of different categories. And all of it was to make sure that the ad messaging wasn't being tone deaf. It was invaluable for them, and Methodify can do the same for you. Actual customer feedback is a game changer because right now, the wait-and-see attitude is going to wind up making you costly mistakes. Now, connect with your customers, absolutely. Build relationships, build trust, build fans, do all those things, but test everything. And Methodify can get you started today. Now, to find out more about Methodify and to set up a demo, just Methodify it. Literally, go to methodify.it/BeanCast. That's methodify.it/BeanCast. And as a way of saying thanks, every BeanCast listener who signs up and completes a demo will receive a $20 Amazon gift card just for your time. Don't hold this information to yourself. Spread the news. Let your friends know about it. Let your coworkers know about it. Again, that address is methodify.it/BeanCast, and we thank them very much for their support of our program. Well, talking about other topics, we have another topic about upfronts. We talked about upfronts ad nauseum last week, but the upfront drama continued this past week. While brands in the A&A continue to push for a permanent move to calendar year buying and merging the upfronts with the new fronts and all kinds of little changes to the way that things are done, NBCU pushed back saying that they understood flexibility for this year, but that the real issues needing to open up, digitize, and radically reshape I got to start over here. But the real issue needing to open up, digitize, and radically reshape the way deals get done in the entire marketplace was what they really wanted to do. Now, okay, I totally screwed that up. But Ron, I can't read. But where do you fall on all this? What's your thoughts? I'm like reading through the script, and I'm like, forget about it. I can't even do it. I'm just giving up.
I think I know what you're talking.
Hopefully you got a sense for it, especially since you're subbing in on this topic at the last minute.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry, what's an upfront? If you just tell me that, then I'll be. No, this is again one of those. Are we still talking about? I don't mean we on this podcast, Bob. I mean we in the marketing, advertising, content ecosystem. This was something that from the beginning was always based on the seller. That is by their calendar, by their rules. And the second disruption kind of comes in. What do? We tweak it, and we call them the new upfronts or the new fronts. And at the end of the day, the exact same media buying model exists today. And when are we going to blow that up? When are we going to stop having five holdcos control whatever the number is, 80% of the advertising dollars being geared towards broadcast programs? When are we going to stop that? When are we going to open that up and make media buying far more transparent? When are we going to merge creative and media back into one shop again? When are we going to stop the scam that's programmatic? All those sorts of things. And what are we doing is we're arguing about calendar years. We need marketers from the A&A to step up and go, look, we want this to change in a completely different way because our money is funding the entire ecosystem. We're paying for every single show that's made. We're paying for every single media agency and creative agency that's out there. And we take that money from consumers, but we're funding the entire ecosystem, and it's going to be done the way we want to do it, not the way you want to do it. In improv comedy, there's an exercise called the status, where how do you change status within a scene, and how can a character go from high status to low status? And what the ANA and its member organizations has to realize, they should have the status in this relationship. They should be dictating the terms. And all it takes is for one massive CPG or big budget marketer to go, not doing it, I'm taking my money and I'm going elsewhere. For this to change. Until that happens, we're going to end up with the same thing.
Is it really that easy, though? Because when you consider the fact that there's a finite number of TV commercials, it's not like the digital realm where you have this endless supply of inventory and everybody's like just buying as many ads as they can and for as cheaply as possible. This is a finite inventory with premium programming that brands want to be part of. And to put it like one brand walking away, That's like, Publicis walking away from the lions that one year. It's just like everybody else got more lions, and Publicis didn't get any kind of lauds or accolades for that. So what did it really solve? What did it really change? And I'm wondering if that's the same thing. It's like, again, it's another example. Pepsi steps out of the Super Bowl and tries to do good things for people, and next year they're back in the Super Bowl because they realized that they needed that media property. So I'm wondering, can a single brand step away like that, or does it need to be as a block in order to make it work?
And does it have to be, does it have to be a whole brand, or could it be like you said, Ron, could it be A&A, but because they call the shots to a certain extent, they bring the money. Could they start to pilot or suggest some programs that could be run, as a pilot each year? Actually because I hear a lot of people complaining about this. It's like an annual discussion. This year it's going to get super messy, and next year it's going to be even messier because we won't know whether to go back to normal or stick with some of the possible changes. But is it a lot of people complaining but not anyone bringing solutions? Have any of you heard? Yeah. I'm not from media background. Has anyone proposed anything?
Yeah, so that's for me. As I was researching this, there was like suggestions back in 2007, and they tried for a year and then it fell away. So for me, if you ask the question, do they want to change a bad system that works for a new system that might not? Most people would say, yep, keep it as it is. I'm just going to bitch and moan about it all year until next time round, because no one wants to fix it, and because no one wants to give up power. And this is the thing. There's only 100% of the pie. And if I've got 75, I don't want to give you 74. I don't want to make it 74. And so the power dynamic is what's driving all this, because if you hear about what people are complaining about, oh, the measurement sucks and there's not much trust and the quality, and I can't buy digital and program and on TV. And so everyone knows it's broken, but no one wants to give an inch. And I just, when I read and learn about how the whole upfronts was created, I kind of laugh, because literally it was everyone in the room. I think in New York somewhere, and you had these boards and you'd put stuff up, and it was like, what? And it's basically a slightly evolved version of the 1950s and 60s, which clearly cannot work for today. So if so I know I don't want to be a media buyer in my life, because that job is a thankless task. And as a marketer, when I just remember the media people explaining to me how the upfronts work, and I'm just thinking, this is the stupidest idea in the world. This is the stupidest marketplace in the world, but I have to do it because I'm a bad marketer if I don't. So I guess if you're a content and a purpose-driven brand and you find other ways, then you probably build your brand, experiential, do all the other things, and then when you get money, you spend on TV. Like all the digital brands, they basically do it direct, and then when they get money, they buy TV ads to say buy my product. But because I just think the innovation is rife. If you listen to some, as we were doing the research, the company, the broadcasters, and how they want to bring measurement that really works and data that you can trust and audience, and it's like, huh? So basically, they're saying everything's BS. It's we're kind of pulling the wool over each other's eyes, but not really. And I'm looking at this from the outsider, thinking it is definitely an industry rife for innovation. Unfortunately, the people who don't play the industry are the Facebooks and these worlds who basically manage to do that job, but not have the same regulation and rules and get away with it. So, sorry, Bob, I don't think it's going to be fixed this year, despite the crisis and everything that's going on. I cannot see a player or an industry body who's prepared to improve the game. They just want to win the bad game.
Well, that's the bigger story here. It's just like, first of all, I don't believe that any of the brands or the media companies really have a solution to what they want for the upfront. I mean, moving it to a calendar year sounds good, but why? I mean, nobody can really articulate why that would be better. I mean, they can say it makes more sense because we buy everything else in an annual basis, and we're keeping it to the calendar year, and it's not associated with certain programs coming up. It's more amorphous in our buying of the media that we want to be involved with. But ultimately, they're not really changing anything except the time frame. It's just like and I'm like, that doesn't really fix anything.
That's not the biggest problem.
And then
if we start
NBC
calling media agencies for what they are, which is value-added resellers, that changes the description of it, right? Which is real. That's all they're doing, is they're buying stuff at a discount and selling them at a premium, and they're pre-buying.
But it's not the agencies that are the problem here in this situation. I mean, the agencies are a problem in a lot of ways for a lot of the brands. The brands have had a lot of issues with the agencies over the past decade with everything from kickbacks to spiffing and all kinds of other problems. But what it comes down to is that.
Well, Bob, I was doing research, and the thing which tops the list of change is transparency. So people want more flexibility in timing, cancellations, pricing, placements and reporting, consistency. So this idea of transparency is actually, I think, the thing that everyone can agree on. And so who can be the Switzerland, who can be the third party to kind of feed that into the system? Because I think everyone agrees on that. So you're right. I actually don't think the timing is the issue of the year. It's more transparency.
So in other words,
nebulous.
So what you're saying basically, yeah, thank you for rescuing me here, because it's just like NBC's proposal is essentially that. It's essentially that, we have a bigger issue, which is this transparency issue. It's just like there's no common theme. There's no common system for getting ad deals done. And we need to make that a common platform that all the networks are using and all the networks are involved with. And it's just, for me, I'm looking at that, I'm going, well, great idea, NBC, but really it seems like it's just smoke and mirrors, because they're trying to preserve the deals that they're already trying to put in place right now.
Yeah, and is that's also why they're saying that the new fronts should be an upfronts, right? Because new fronts is more digital, so that some of their accountability or trackability might rub off on upfronts. Is that what they're saying? Like that it might just sort of, through osmosis become more transparent in upfronts. What about keeping new fronts separate and do the innovation there? So because we know that new fronts, people want new fronts and upfronts to be more joined. So that some of the new fronts, discipline and transparency rubs off on upfronts. But if we innovate in new fronts, maybe that's easier, because as you all said, upfronts is archaic. It hasn't changed a lot in previous decades, and we know in our heart of hearts that TV is not going to look the same in 10 years, certainly not the same in 20 years. So maybe we do uncouple them, even though there's call to join them, and we do more innovation in new fronts. Because I think one of you mentioned it when we started this topic, but when creative and media were more intertwined, we loved that. And smaller markets still do that. Some of the most creative agencies in the world, and I mean ideas that just really break through and speak to people, they have a much closer relationship. I know this firsthand coming from smaller markets, have a much closer relationship between media and creative, and it really works. So maybe we just have to call it what it is, and we focus on innovation and new fronts. Again, not from a media background, certainly not buying, but could that work?
Yeah,
we actually just had something in Canada here where Rogers Communications, which is one of the largest advertisers in the country, I think the largest or second largest cell phone company, on the Blue Jay, everything, walked away from their existing agency relationships and formed a new agency, which was put creative and media together in one shop finally. Like we used to have it.
Yep, it still happens in New Zealand a lot. It happens in some independent agencies here, actually, in the US as well. Yeah,
I think there's actually looking at global innovation is a smart move in terms of what else happens elsewhere, and I think there's opportunity there. I just come back to the point that as a modern marketer right now, you're tearing your hair out. I mean, I don't have any, so I'm fine on that. So, but you really are struggling because this separation of upfronts and new, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I got to put money. I'm trying to win with my audience or win with my consumer or shopper, and the system is not helping me. I don't have transparent information, or I don't have full trust, and I don't have full competency myself. So help me do this well. So I can really understand that it is a challenge to get it right. And so from the marketing side, I can understand why they're looking for knowledge and insight and help. And I can understand from the industry side saying, hey, change the timeline. But it's not going to fix the fundamental issues. And it's such a big market that if you could make it better, then perhaps there's going to be more money. But ultimately, in the short term, if you're going to have this system which seems to be separate from digital, social, and all that stuff with TV, it just cannot be. It's going to break at some stage, maybe not 2020, but surely by 22, 23, it's ultimately going to break and then force that innovation that helps everyone, perform better and everyone win.
It's going to break.
Well, I got to move on to our last two topics because we got to cover them very, very fast, running out of time here. Next, a curious fact about the video game culture is that when it comes to online gaming, most players rely on companion social and communication applications on phones or laptops to facilitate the interactions that go along with playing. Well, game makers are finally waking up to this fact and are vowing to incorporate more of these tools into the games themselves. Michelle, on the surface, this seems like it's a kind of a no-brainer, but is this really just another case of brands trying to own all customer interactions? And is that a good thing when it comes to the gaming community and the ability to get the word out about a game?
Okay, so this is a very big topic, and
I'm glad I gave you lots of time to cover it.
Yeah, absolutely, it's totally fine. Well, I actually prepped. It's cool. I talked to some people, some friends of mine who work in gaming, and they told me how big of a topic it was. So I'm just stealing that. Game makers are not just waking up to this fact. This is a conversation that has been happening for years and years, and it's not just that gamers are using laptops and phones as companions. A lot of PC gamers will be running concurrent social platforms, programs, apps at the same time as they play. So some games, just to set the scene, obviously are social, right? You've got multiplayer games, you're talking to your teammates. You can do that on PC-based, or you can do it on consoles, right? If anyone here has played Fortnite, my husband plays on the Switch and plays with his brothers, and they're in Canada, and so they're having chats. That's in the game. They don't have their phones out and chatting side by side because it's all about gameplay. Other big strategic games, or just games between friends, much more serious players, yeah, they use other apps. So they're on Discord at the same time. They're on Steam, maybe some of these other like companion apps. The reason that this works is because it's not just chat during the game. You're chatting about a bunch of other things. You're talking about strategy. You're making you're creating teams. You're swapping gameplay and insights with other people, and you're actually building community. So this isn't just about while you're playing necessarily. It's not just about communication. It's actually about community. And so the question is, are these game platforms themselves, I know EA has said at least that they are going to start to bring in more social capability and community capability, at least communication capability into their games. That's a really big undertaking for a game maker to make, because are you then going to be responsible for the community building? Are you going to be responsible for the types of things that people are talking about on those platforms? I know a big game maker, a major game maker, global game maker, who, talking to my friend, I won't reveal who it is, they spent a lot of money and many months debating exactly this. And they decided to not bring those features into their platform, and to just to let people do their own organizing on the side, because otherwise the responsibility for the game maker then is huge. And then you're also managing community, and what gamer really wants their community to be managed and overlorded by the game maker themselves? They don't necessarily want that. They also want to be able to create communities that work for multiple games. Discord has become incredibly popular, and I mean it's also become it's basically like fan popular. So I don't know if you guys heard about when Ninja and Drake were playing Fortnite recently. They were streaming Fortnite, and Ninja talked Drake real time through how to set up Discord, because he was getting annoyed that the phone connection, because they were talking to each other at the same time as well as playing the game and streaming it, wasn't working well. So, he talked him through setting up Discord, which, Discord got a bit of a boost from that. But the thing is, people are going to want to communicate and build community in any way they want to, and they want it to feel autonomous. They want it to feel like they control it and control the narrative as well. And yeah, sure, if the game platforms want to do it, great, but they have to get it really right. And is it worth it for them to do that?
I have a question, Michelle. When you were talking with your colleagues and friends who were in gaming, because when I read this, what I thought about was, I don't know if you remember, like just a few weeks ago, it came out that Twitch was starting to broadcast music concerts. And how
they broadcast a bunch of stuff. Yeah, it's certainly not just the game.
Yeah, right. But they started started paying artists in a really interesting way and everything, and it was really easy for them because they had built the culture and community around audience participation within an event. For them to just go, okay, they're not watching a video game, but they're now watching a music concert. And our model is really easy for us to do that. And when I read this, I thought, are the EAs of the world doing this because they fear that the social add-ons are building community around their technology, and it's ridiculously easy to just go out and plug in a game into that ecosystem, and easier to do that than it is for a gaming organization to go out and bring in all the social tools to deliver community. So was it out of fear?
Streaming and community are a little bit, yeah. I mean, I see them as a little bit different as well. So, I mean, you could stream on Twitch, but you're not going to build community on Twitch like you would on Discord, for example. They're for different purposes. But I think maybe there's some fear in it. But I also think perhaps a lot of it is the people who work at ER are gamers, and that maybe they want to make it more seamless. That might be part of it. It might come from purely like, hey, we have too many different systems. Why don't we give some of these features to our players? And why don't we build some of this community around our players? And maybe we will gain more insight from our players.
Isn't that the same trap that all manufacturers or all brands kind of fall into when they try to own their audience instead of allowing their audience to flourish where it decides to flourish and then nurture it there? I mean,
totally.
It feels like
you don't exactly have a great.
You create this robust community internally, and how are you spreading the word about your games? You're taking them off. You're taking these players off of their other platforms where they can maybe be sharing more openly about their game experiences and getting other people involved. It seems like it cuts marketing off at the knees to take everything in-house like this. It certainly helps on the loyalty front, so from a loyalty effort standpoint, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, but from the marketing and the word of mouth effort, it sounds like it's kind of a stunted approach to marketing.
I think we'll see where it goes. I don't think that they're going to get, I don't think they're going to build a utopia and then see what happens. I think they're going to build it incrementally, and it may be that they end up backing away from what they've said that they're going to build, that they don't go as far as they thought they would, because I mean, they're certainly going to meet with some, like, I wouldn't call it like backlash necessarily, because people don't have to use the platform. They can use other platforms. They can continue to use Discord. They're not forced to use EA. Maybe they're thinking that they're going to be capturing a new generation of folks who are coming up. And if they start gaming and the community's already on that platform, then maybe they can keep them there and not push them, not have them go out and use 2 or 3 other systems at the same time as they're gaming. But I think also that the reason that this other big game maker, shied away from doing this, it's not just a legal battle, which it will become a big legal undertaking for them, but how do you stay on top of how gamers build community? Every day there are new platforms popping up. Every day there are new user behaviors, and I think you're right there, Bob, to a certain extent. Like it does become a bit of a marketing nightmare eventually, because you're creating a closed ecosystem. But I think it's more like a lack of responsibility, and I think they should take that seriously. Like YouTube, for example, doesn't, honestly, beyond some cursory stuff, doesn't really moderate what happens on their platform. Right. Yeah.
I think the macro. Yeah, you're hitting the head on the macro. I think if you're now looking at society and culture and where things are, there's an interesting lens. Is, can I do it? Can I make money? Should I do it? Should I make money? And can I do it well? Because if I'm in it, if I have to be in it for the long term and do it for the right reasons, we've seen players in the market now who are ultimately responsible for community, not necessarily living up to the responsibilities that we as people think they should. So I think it's an interesting one that it may be a consideration. If I'm a raging capitalist, what's the best decision? And if I'm thinking about what's right for me, the community and the world and society, I might actually make a different choice. So that's an interesting sort of moral lens, which isn't very popular in business perhaps 5-10 years ago. But now I think people, especially in COVID and all that's going on, people are going to be more moral, or hopefully more moralistic in their business decisions.
Yeah,
Well,
I think EA, I'm not sure how they are with partnerships, but the company that I spoke to, at least, they are huge on partnerships. And actually, my friend was their partnerships manager. So making sure that they are working with these other communities and making sure that they're working with leaders anytime there's an integration point, basically, in their actual game or in their like gamer ecosystem or universe. And, you know, maybe EA want to control more. With this other company was very, very good at outreach and integrations and things. So yeah, that could be part of it.
Well, we got to move on to our final topic real quick. I want to hit this because it's a big deal. Finally, Walmart is hoping to bolster the third-party selling capabilities through a deal with Shopify. Spotify. That would be an interesting effort to try to do this. So, Ron, is this deal good for anybody? I mean, competition for Amazon is always good, but is Walmart the right player to be doing this? Is it going to work out for them? What are your predictions?
I think it's great for everybody, and time will tell, and we'll see. And I have to say full disclosure here that Walmart Canada is a client of my agency, Church and State, and I had no conversations with them about this, and have before, and still haven't. So I have no inside knowledge on this, but I think the one who is coming out of this looking great, and I think it will pay off beautifully for them, is actually Shopify. I think when we've got the FANG companies all, you know, kind of jockeying for who's going to own what space and who's going to completely own the customer relationship and everything else, we've got Shopify who's trying to play nice with everybody and be the back end e-commerce engine for the businesses that really drive the economy. And for them to go to somebody to strengthen their own platform is tremendous. Secondly, for them to go to the largest omni-channel realtor in the world, I think is a big step for them. Now, is it too big? Is Walmart Marketplace too big for the merchants that are going to come in? We'll have to see. Will the Walmart Media Group work with them so that they can help scale their business beyond making it available to, I made a note here for how many, 120 million people a month. That's a massive audience. And so, you know, if we can help these small businesses scale beyond, you know, the home-based business that, let's face it, many of them are, I think this is a wonderful thing. I've got a really open mind about it.
Well, I was doing, as I was researching this, there was one thing that the first thing I looked at was to look at the Shopify stock price on March 18th, 2020 was it $305, and on June the 19th it's $876. and so that's some serious bank that's been made, and there is value being created and someone's making a heck of a lot of money. Whether it will play out in the long term of that value, because their valuation is essentially tripled in 3 months, which is crazy. And so I think there's somewhat of a bubble somewhere. I just don't know where that is, but that's just it.
Well, the bubble is the expectation that Walmart's going to buy them.
Yeah, and so exactly, there's something else going on. So that's just one thing. I was just crunching numbers, and if you'd invested 3 months ago, then you're probably retiring and not listening to this show anymore. And then
retiring and only listening to the show.
Only listening. That's right. You're buying the show for like 50 million off Bob because that's how much it's worth. But
please, any deals, send them my way.
Yeah, exactly. Look at that, boosting the show here, Bob. But from the consumer perspective, I read this and I thought, maybe I will open up a Walmart account, because Amazon, bless their heart, they're getting all my money right now, and there isn't a meaningful competitor. So if I'm thinking, maybe I will open up a profile because I can do this, I can get this, I can get that. So from a consumer perspective and from from that perspective, I think there's an upside. And obviously the third parties who are kind of locked into one ecosystem, I think that the competitive nature may help Amazon perhaps be a bit more, I think, friendlier to their marketplace and perhaps bring some innovation there. So I think there's good in there. But I as I say, maybe the cynic in me is just looking at the valuation and the dollars going into the stock price, thinking there's a big play there. There's a lot of money being made, but is it going to play out in the end? I guess we just have to wait and see.
I mean,
like what you say about the merchants.
To put that into perspective, Samuel, the Shopify is now the most valuable company in Canada, and I know we're a tiny little country, but they have raised past the Royal Bank of Canada as the most valuable organization in the country.
That sounds I mean, is it Should it be? Could it be? Is it really worth that? Maybe it is, but yeah.
I'm just waiting for Rim to come back. Come on.
So I like what you said about the merchants there. I think it does give them choice. And I think that too many people who were just beholden to Amazon will now have choice. And Shopify is, I mean, we know it's been increasing as an e-commerce platform exponentially for the last few years, and it's really surpassed all of its competitors like Magento and other folks out there. So I think that it's definitely good. I don't online shop a lot. I don't buy anything from Amazon. I don't have an Amazon account. I like buying local. Yeah, it's weird. I grew up digital,
You're
but
the
I
one.
really
Yeah,
like
exactly.
local.
You've got
I'm
to-
the
Jeff,
one. Thank
You've
you.
got to tell Jeff.
I do not, because I just don't need to, and I don't like the idea that everything arrives in shipping. I think that's not the greatest, but yeah, I think for a lot of people who buy a lot of their groceries and all sorts of other things, who are maybe not Whole Foods shoppers as well, this is going to provide an alternative for them that will just streamline their cart. And I think it's also helping a lot of smaller merchants, move into the Walmart ecosystem. Will they then start bringing some of those brands in-house, perhaps? Who knows? It's pretty cool from a buyer point of view, from Walmart as buyers, to find out new brands and who's doing well. And it does seem like they're not charging upfront for the merchants. They're only taking a fee after a transaction.
That's a big move.
Yeah, which makes, I mean, obviously you're going to get a lot of people signing up, right? Signing on. So that's great. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of Amazon and sort of the big e-commerce giants, certainly not Walmart either. But when I mentioned this to a couple of friends yesterday, they just said any competition to Amazon is good.
No,
So,
that's a good point.
that's
That's a good point.
You mentioned something, Michelle, where them bringing it in-house, and this is what I potentially love about this deal, is that what we've seen Amazon do time and time again is that they see what products are selling well, and then they white label it, and they just provide on their own platform you the option to buy a cheaper Amazon-made product. And what I'd love to see Walmart do is, once they see the products that are then doing well in marketplace, instead of white labeling and bringing it and duplicating the product on their own, is then making the move from marketplace into store, because that's still a massive, massive opportunity for somebody. And with the data, I think they'll be able to unearth some great products that they would have never known about before. And those products will find its way on store.
You got me arguing against it now, because I'm now realizing that's a cunning plan. Because some companies don't have the best reputation, but you're right. If they're going to now get the data and the insight and then bring products to market under their private label exclusive brands or whatever, then there's that risk, because we know Amazon are doing it. I mean, full disclosure,
they do it all the time.
I've spent 40% of my career managing exclusive brands or private labels for companies. So that is a watch out. If you're playing in that platform, just what's your 1, 3, and 5 year plan? Because if you can assume they're going to copy you within 18 months, if it's a good idea, then where do you go next? So don't be naive, I guess, as you start to as it opens up, because it's going to be fiercely competitive, and Walmart don't play. So that's a good consideration.
Well, it's time. We gotta wrap this up.
They might do nice and bring them in. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Dark with that, Sam, but I think it's a very good watch out. Yeah, you're right.
Well, with that, it's time for the fair foul. Let's try this again. It's time for this week's fair, fail, foul. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug. Starting with Michelle Excell. You can find her at theantipodean.co.
No, antipodean.us.
.us.
that is quite all right.
It has been I've only said this 100 times, and it's just like, I can't believe I got it wrong.
That's quite all right. I have no events coming up that I'm going to be speaking at, or no sort of workshops that I'm running recently. So I've been thinking about this, but just now is an incredible time to be thinking about immersive. So that is what I specialize in as a creative tech strategist, specializing in immersive tech. I'm helping a lot of brands now with how they move forward in terms of event production and taking that virtual. Doesn't have to mean VR, just digital. AR is experiential. You may or may not have thought about that before, but think about it. It is. So specializing in these technologies has been fabulous. And this COVID time has given some brands the opportunity to be able to work with me to figure out strategies moving forward, regardless of what happens next. So do check out my website, theantipodean.us. It links to a Google Doc. Apologies, it's being rebuilt, and would love to chat about immersive tech.
Remember that US. Ignore my ignore my com. It's a US. Next up, Sam Monnie. You can find him at marketingtransform.com. Am I right?
You are right there, Bob. I'll step in there just to save you from yourself. And yes, Across the Pond Marketing Transformed is the podcast I co-host with my great buddy Chris Lawson. He's based in the UK and I'm based in the US, but you get not one but two British accents for about 25-30 minutes every week. And we're about to announce the launch of season 4. Season 4 is going to go down a bit differently because we're going to get into more of a how-to approach, and we're going to tell you about our agile marketing action plan and what goes in each of them. So there are certain things that make it into the plan, and we're going to help you bring it to life and put it into action. So it's a must-listen season of Across the Pond Marketing Transformed. You can find me at marketingtransformed.com, and with all the sound sage advice I've been given, I expect to receive lots of emails or lots of hits on social media. If you want to hear about marketing transformation or just chat in general, reach out to me through those platforms, LinkedIn and Twitter, mostly, a bit of Instagram, but less Facebook, I'm afraid.
And just for everybody out there who ever wonders, Sam is exactly like this in real life. Exactly what you get on the show is exactly what you get in real life. Last but not least, Rob Tite is Ron Tite. I got your name wrong in the script. How did that happen? Ron Tite. You can find him at churchstate.co. That's a co, not a com, a co. I'm absolutely sure about that. I checked it twice. Tell us what's going on in your world. What do you want to promote?
Well, maybe I'd like to promote my brother, Rob Tite. He's a wonderful, wonderful person. I literally do have a brother named Rob. With this, I've been doing 1 to 2, virtual keynotes a week. So that's been great because no planes and hotels. And so as soon as I click the end button at the end of a speech, I get to dial back into the agency. And we've been doing, a lot of business transformation work for clients. Clients that are using this time to reinvent their business. Professionally, it's been a really amazing 3 months. You can check out my book, Think, Do, Say, available in all the bookstores. And you can find me at rontite.com, or the agency is churchstate.co. Thank you.
And as for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. You can even find out how to advertise on this program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it is time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, the fair of the week. I don't know, Sam. Buffalo Wild Wings Moist Tie-Let Father's Day promotion was just wonderful to me. I mean, they sold out all 50 of them in next to no time, but they actually made a tie out of moist towelettes that came in a giant wrapper that you peeled off just like a wet wipe, and you just could wear it and make all the mess you want.
Love the idea. It's a brilliant idea, and I was surprised they only made 50 of them. I was reading that there's like a tie clip you could get for $45. There was a great campaign a few years ago by Oscar Mayer. They had this bacon alarm clock concept that they ran for 2 or 3 years, and it just caught people's imaginations, and they people were buying on eBay and all sorts for a lot of money. So I think this idea has legs. I think I read it was a Martin agency that came up with it. So you might want to relaunch and redo this, because I think this is a bigger idea than you can possibly imagine. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really know why they charged for it. It seemed odd. It was like $25, but they only made 50 of them.
Because you try to buy a tie, and this was like, that costs $40 or $50. That's a cheap tie.
Oh, I know, but I mean, they'll immediately become collector's items. I'm sure that's what happens with all of these things, and you find them on, I don't know if anyone uses eBay anymore, but then you'll find them on eBay, and yeah, people auctioning them off. Yep.
Michelle, I shop locally. I don't use eBay.
I actually buy online secondhand. I do buy secondhand things online.
Yeah, you buy ties. You buy ties off eBay. That's a bit, yeah.
Okay, the fail of the week, Michelle, goes to Smithfield. They got called to the mat for advertising that they provide the safest pork products in the U.S. at a time when their employees are getting sick and dying from COVID, and they've got all kinds of issues with product safety and violations in the product safety realm. I mean, this is not a good time to be doing that. And they're finally being called to the mat and taken to court for false advertising with that statement.
Yeah. It just seems like they're taking a leaf out of somebody else's playbook, doesn't it? If you say it, it shall be true. And so, ridiculous move. How did they not think that they would be found out? But who knows? Maybe for a lot of people, they will see that and they won't see the retraction, or they won't see the lawsuit. So, it's a travesty.
Well, speaking of someone else's playbook, Facebook is the foul of the week. Continued resistance toward banning racist groups and hate speech, particularly from Trump, from their platform. There's a brewing boycott going on, Ron. I mean, it's just like a lot of agencies are gathering together and clamoring for some kind of boycott to happen. Right now, as far as I know at this time, I mean, I've just, let's just say it's like 9 o'clock on a Saturday. We've been doing the show for an hour. Before we came on, only the North Face was joined in this boycott. That's why it wasn't a topic yet. I'm kind of waiting and seeing whether this boycott gets off the ground. But all the agencies are out there telling their clients to boycott Facebook until they make changes to the way that they handle the content.
Yeah, this is most certainly a foul, and this is going to be a big week for this story. I think you may, in next week's show, maybe explain. I mean, we'll see. It's either going to go away, and people are just going to follow the playbook that they've been using for the past couple of years. Like, well, there's such a great community there, you know. I think what they have to come clean on is, like you've stated, and we've seen these, accounts who are duplicating what the current administration has said and are getting flagged for inappropriate content. And so if it's not that, then what is the reason? Like, what is it? Like, why don't you just come clean and tell us what it is? Is it that you're afraid of some executive order coming in, banning your control? Are you afraid of people thinking that you're censoring and that they don't want to think that Facebook has a hand in electing a government? Like, what is it that you're afraid of? And, it's funny that we're coming full circle on this, because we started the first segment by saying, look, we really, let's talk about why you have been racist in the past, and let's just come clean with complete transparency. And we need Facebook to do the same thing.
You know what, Bob? Maybe this section should be called Fair, Fail, or Facebook, because they seem to come up every week.
I don't keep track, but you're probably right. Well,
and maybe you can get them as a sponsor. So there you go. There's a shameless plug there.
I think I pretty much buried that hatchet a long time ago. Well, have a suggestion for this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag FairFailFoul. That's #FairFailFoul. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just like, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.